We are very privileged to have Dr. Christine Guth with her title of the top famous food and restaurants in Japanese prints. Dr. Christine Guth, I guess for all of us who have studied Japanese history, Japanese art history, need no further introduction to her career, to the work that she has contributed to this field. She has taught at prestigious institutions, including Princeton, Harvard, University of Pennsylvania, and Berkeley. She leads the Asian design specialism in the Victoria and Albert Museum and Royal College of Art postgraduate History of Design program from 2007 until 2016. She has written widely about transnational cultural exchange between the United States and Japan. Her book-length publications, and this is just abbreviated, a few selected titles, include two of my personal favorite, Art of Edo, Japan, The Artist and the City, 1615 to 1868, Longfellow's Tattoo, Tourism and Collecting in Japan, and Hokusai's Great Wave, the biography of a global icon. She is co-author with Haruhiko Fujita of the Encyclopedia of East Asian Design. Just a note on the structure of today's talk. Christine will speak for half an hour, and then Christine and I will be engaged in a 15-minute dialogue and response to her talk. We will finish with a 15-minute Q&A, taking questions from the audience. So please feel free to type in your questions at any time in the Q&A chat box. And you can also upvote questions you want to see answered. And we will take them at the end of the session. So without much further ado, may you all please join me to welcome Christine Guth. Christine, please.
Hello? Am I there? Okay, let me get screen share. There we go. Good morning and good evening to everyone. Thank you very much for that kind introduction, Clement. And it's a great pleasure to be speaking to you from the East Coast of the United States at 7 in the morning, to you in Singapore or wherever you may be, in connection with this wonderful exhibition that I wish I could see. I have seen it virtually, and on that basis have put together a lecture, which I hope will give you a somewhat different perspective on the exhibition, or for those who have an opportunity to see it, will help you look a little bit more closely at some of the prints that are on view. I'm going to talk about food and drink in Japanese prints, because they occupy a very prominent place in the history of woodblock prints, much more prominent than I had expected when I began thinking about this topic. Let me see, I'm going to try to get my, there we go. From ingredients and food preparation to special dishes and banquets, almost every aspect of the culinary world is depicted in the medium of woodblock prints. The prominence of this subject matter speaks to the way that gastronomy became woven into Japanese culture over the course of the Tokugawa period. This was a period when the country was ruled by a succession of shoguns from Edo, which you see on the map here, modern-day Tokyo. And it was a period that lasted from 1603 to 1868, but most of the works that I'm going to be talking about date to the 19th century. Now, it should be no surprise, it should come as no surprise that food and drink, sake predominantly, figures so prominently in prints, because many of the country's most celebrated woodblock print artists were also connoisseurs of fine cuisine, as this illustration from an 1822 woodblock book on the right shows you. Seated around a table enjoying shiboku ryori, a Chinese-style cuisine that was fashionable among Edoites at the time, are the poet Otanampo, he's the one with a European wine glass in his hand, the shaven-headed painter Sakai Hoitsu, the poet Shibutsu, and the chubby literati painter and calligrapher Kameda Bosai. That Hiroshige created a series of 30 prints celebrating Edo's famous restaurants suggests that he too enjoyed fine dining. And one of these prints is on the left, and I will come back to it a little bit later. The development of a flourishing print culture over the course of the Edo period, but especially in the late 18th and 19th centuries, went hand in hand with that of many of the distinctive forms of Japanese cuisine that we know today. Many dishes that we now characterize as Japanese began as regional specialties, specialties that were first encountered through travel. Japanese were prohibited from going abroad during the Edo period, and domestic tourism thrived, often under the pretext of pilgrimage to shrines and temples. And as we all know, eating is one of the great pleasures of travel. We all look forward to that when the pandemic is over, back to being able to go to restaurants and enjoy exotic food. Prints, some of which were issued in the tens of thousands, helped to guide, some of which were issued in the tens of thousands, helped to advertise food and restaurants across the Japanese archipelago. And in my talk today, I'd like to engage in some historical gastrotourism guided by prints, many of them now on view in the exhibition at the Asian Civilisations Museum. Our travels will take us from Kyoto to Edo along the Tokaido, or Great Eastern Coastal Road, that stretched from Sanjo Ohashi to Nihonbashi, the bridges marking the entrance to these two great cities, which you see now on the screen. Along the way, we'll sample an array of local culinary delicacies, and upon reaching Edo, we'll visit some of that city's famous restaurants. Before setting off on our journey, let's look at the kind of cultural and travel information that we may learn from prints. Today, woodblock prints are admired primarily for their visual qualities. But for Edo period travelers, word and image were equally important. Prints were very much a part of the poetic culture of the day, and they also helped viewer to stay au courant of the latest fashions, the top kabuki stars, and the tastiest brands of food and sake, and of course the best restaurants as well. Take, for instance, Hiroshige's depiction of a bonito with 3 sprigs of saxifrage arranged next to it that you see here on the screen. It is accompanied by a mouth-watering, punning poem that could be translated as, "Fresh bonito tastes best when you let it melt in your mouth under the snow of Kamakura." This poem cleverly incorporates the name of a fish, katsuo, and an edible plant, yukinoshita, as well as seasonal and locational references, under the snow and Kamakura. The Japanese word for saxifrage, yukinoshita, literally under the snow, does double duty here, both as the name of a plant and as a marker for late spring. Kamakura is a coastal city not far from Tokyo, where bonito was a local specialty, also in the late spring, early summer. Now, viewers in Hiroshige's day would have enjoyed decoding the many layers of meaning embedded in this print. They wouldn't have just looked at the pictures, but they would have read the poems and the inscriptions. Then while they did this, excuse me, they would vicariously taste the flavors evoked in its visual and verbal interplay. This poem cleverly, excuse me, Japanese consumers of the time also would have been alert to the appearance of compounds such as natori, kome, meisan, meibutsu, and that's meibutsu is the one that is most common. These terms, which you see now on the screen, meaning renowned, peerless, famous product, or famous things, were incorporated into the titles and designs of many prints. All were borrowed and adapted from critical literary terms, meibutsu and meisho, literally thing with a name and famous place. Before the Edo period, meisho were cultural, literary, and devotional landmarks that had achieved canonical status primarily through poetry. The celebrity of the 8-plank bridge, or Yatsuhashi, the meisho depicted in the screen by Ogata Korin, for instance, originated in a poem in the 10th century classic, The Tales of Ise. Meibutsu could refer both to treasured heirlooms, such as swords or utensils used in the tea ceremony that were given personal names, or to famous regional culinary and craft products. The title of this view of women selling color woodblock prints, inscribed in the upper right of each panel of the triptych, for instance, informs the viewer that prints, or nishikie, were the famous products of Edo. When tourists went to Edo, they often left with prints in hand as souvenirs or as presents for others. With the rise of tourism in the 19th century, these labels were increasingly applied to regional foods and business enterprises. A case in point is this print by Kuniyoshi in the current exhibition. It forms part of a series titled Pictures of Famous Products of Land and Sea. The scene here advertises a style of soba noodles for which Shinshu, a region in modern-day Nagano prefecture, is famous. Soba noodles, my goodness, it's 7 in the morning, apologies. Soba noodles may be made of buckwheat alone, but because this grain has no gluten, making it difficult to form a dough, it's often combined with a smaller percentage of flour. The numbers 2 and 6 inscribed here may refer to a blend of 2 parts wheat to 6-part buckwheat. This print is noteworthy in that it incorporates the term meisan in the title, as well as the term meibutsu in the placard hanging outside the shop. A print like this could provide the traveler with useful information about what local specialties to look for in the Shinshu region, or could serve as a tangible reminder of a visit already made there. The Tokaido Road was part of the network of 5 major highways that ensured transportation and communication between the shogunal capital of Edo and all parts of the main island of Honshu. Along its roughly 500 meters, it's about 320 miles, there were 53 post stations where weary travelers could find food, lodging, shopping, and recreation. Some of these stations, such as Shono, were tiny hamlets, but others grew into major commercial hubs with thousands of inhabitants, and still others boasted feudal castles, such as the one seen in the view of Yoshida on the right. On average, there were about 19 kilometers or 5 ri between each post station. So travelers who could expect to be on the road for about 2 weeks as they went on foot between Kyoto and Edo often carried food such as the rice balls seen here along with them.
Christine,
yes?
I'm sorry, just to interrupt, because there are some comments from the Q&A section. Very sorry to interrupt. Are you sharing the full screen at your side? It seems okay on my side. Did you hit play on the top of it?
It is on my side. I've got share. Yeah, I'm sharing screen.
Okay. Oh, great. Okay. Yep, they responded. Everything is okay. Sorry to disturb.
Okay. No problem. So everything is okay?
Yep, okay. I think so. Thank you.
Well, we will continue on our journey, having tasted some nice rice balls, having taken them out of our wicker basket. And let's move on to soba noodles again. Soba noodles, which could be had almost anywhere, were also inexpensive fare for those on a budget. Soba was probably the dish most frequently consumed by travelers because it was readily available on all major roads. As sold from small stands or itinerant vendors, noodles were generally pre-cooked and simply topped with steaming broth. Made in this way, they were quick and easy to eat on the run. Many locales claimed soba as their local specialty. Among them was mitsuke, a station on the Tokaido Road in modern Shizuoka Prefecture, depicted here by Hokusai on the left. But the Shinshu region of modern Nagano Prefecture, where buckwheat was grown, was especially famous, as seen in Kuniyoshi's famous products of land and sea, which I showed earlier. Another place where soba was famous was in the town of Moriyama, not far from Kyoto, not on the Tokaido, but on the Kisokaido Road, the inland road. And that is being advertised in this print by Kuniyoshi, which you see on the right, and this print is in the exhibition. I think few prints capture so delightfully the pleasures of slurping soba dipped into a soy-based sauce than this imaginative design. The traveler here is none other than Bodhidharma. Known in Japan as Daruma, this Indian sage is said to have founded the Zen sect of Buddhism. But his rotund form also made him a popular emblem of good luck. Kuniyoshi, with a sense of humor characteristic of many of his designs, portrays the greedy sage scarfing down box after box of soba. Custom dictated that guides to the Tokaido Road be arranged from Edo to Kyoto, Kyoto being where the emperor resided, that is from northeast to southwest. But we're going to travel in the opposite direction since our destination is Edo and its restaurants. Time allows for only a small sampling of the dizzying varieties of tasty foods available en route. Our first stop after leaving Kyoto is Minakuchi, a village in modern Shiga Prefecture that specialized in kampyo, shavings of a kind of gourd known as yugao or fukuba in Japanese. This was harvested from late July to December. In this print from Hiroshige's celebrated 1833 series of the 53 stations of the Tokaido Road, we see a woman on the far left cutting a large gourd into elongated strips, while others hang these strips out to dry over a bamboo fence. Kampyo is used in many ways, but most commonly in futomaki sushi, which you see in the lower right. Before making use of the strips for this purpose or other purposes, they have to be reconstituted, first by soaking and then by boiling them in water with flavorings, including soy sauce and sweet kneading. And this transformed their normally naturally creamy color into a mahogany brown. Prepared in this way, kampyo has a chewy texture and color that offers a pleasing contrast to vinegared rice. At a time when there was no refrigeration, sun drying and fermentation were widely used to preserve fish and vegetables so as to have them in the off-season. Further along the road is Ishiyakushi, a post station in modern Mie Prefecture, named after a famous statue of Yakushi, the healing Buddha. Hokusai designed a number of versions of the 53 stations of the Tokaido Road, several in the small format that you see here on the left. And it's about half the size of the view of a Minakuchi that I just showed you. Each one of these prints is distinguished by the calligraphic style adopted for the names of the stations. Here, Ishiyakushi is inscribed in blocky kaisho script in the center of the print. And on the right, you see that the artist has added the information that this is one of a series of 53 stations, in fact, number 45. Two travelers, one of whom has removed his hat, prepare to enter a small shop with a sign outside for unagi, grilled eel. The eel split down the belly or back, gutted, boned, butterflied, and dipped into delicious sweet soy-based sauce, was usually served over rice with a dash of sansho pepper. And you get some hint of this tasty dish in the slide on the right. Eel is a good source of protein, and in the Edo period was thought to promote good health in the height of summer. Even today, it's still customary to eat it on a special day in late July or early August. Grilled eel was once an inexpensive dish, but no longer, due to the decline in domestic eel production, and despite efforts to farm it. Much of the unagi consumed in Japan must be sourced from abroad. As we move northeast towards Edo, we reach Kuwana, a seaport at the mouth of Ise Bay, where we may encounter pilgrims en route to Ise Shrine, since this was an entry point to Ise province. Kuwana was famous for clams, hamaguri. If you look closely at the print on the right here, on the lower right, you can see that these clams were grilled on pine cones, which gave them a distinctive flavor. As these two images suggest, grilled clams were a relatively humble form of food, a kind of street food. They were cooked outdoors and eaten on the run. But Hokusai's designs also serve as reminders that, with the exception of formal banquets where male chefs trained in the elaborate techniques required for cutting fish into intricate shapes, food preparation was carried out primarily by women. Few print artists did more to popularize the pleasures and perils of travel along the Tokaido Road than Hiroshige, who created some 30 versions of its stations in various formats and styles, drawing attention to different aspects of the journey. Unlike other artists who represented this subject, Hiroshige is known to have traveled the road himself between Edo and Tokyo, and his views often have an experiential quality lacking in those of others. Now, this doesn't mean that he was always a reliable guide. Like all artists, he often used his imagination to enhance the aesthetic quality of his compositions. 3 versions of Sarugababa, Monkey Plateau, at the Futagawa post station, give a sense of the visual variety that this artist brought to the same site. In the earliest view from 1833, on the left, on the upper left, Hiroshige presents a dramatic vista of the vast barren plain called Monkey Plateau, while the second from 1840, below it, is a more intimate roadside view focused on the human drama. In the third 1855 version, we look down from the top of the hill to the rustic thatched shops along the road, a perspective that is dramatized by Hiroshige's choice of a vertical rather than the more customary horizontal format. Although the mood conveyed in each print is quite different, all draw attention to the local meibutsu, kashiwa mochi, a sticky sweet rice cake wrapped in an oak leaf. Kashiwa means winning peace, and it's said that this delicacy got its name because the 16th century warlord Hideyoshi ate it while in Futagawa. This legend has made it an auspicious treat for Boys' Day on May 5th. Today, Boys' Day is Children's Day. Today, Numazu is the center of Shizuoka Prefecture's commercial fishing industry, and its primary product is dried horse mackerel. But in the Edo period, when bonito was still plentiful on the bay, in the bay off its shores, it was a major supplier of katsuobushi. Katsuobushi is made from the deboned bonito fillet by a long and complex process involving smoking, drying, and fermenting that transforms the fish into a rock-hard log that has intense flavor. You see that log down below the print here. Grated into slender shavings, it's an indispensable ingredient in making soup stock, but also delicious as a topping for various dishes, including noodles, okonomiyaki, and cold tofu. Because it keeps for a long time and travels well, it was a welcome gift from the returning traveler. In his 1844 series of the Tokaido Road, Hiroshige made sure that the viewer learned that katsuobushi is Kuwana's special product, its meibutsu, by inscribing this information over the roof of a small shop protected by a bamboo fence. There, a fishmonger sets out trays to catch the eye of the passerby. A local woman carrying a baby on her back has just paused to make a purchase, while a group of itinerant musicians continue on their way, perhaps also having purchased some katsuobushi. Tororo-jiru, the local specialty at Mariko, is a soup made of grated mountain yams, immortalized in a poet by the 17th century haiku master, Matsuo Basho. Young leaves of a plum, and at the Mariko station, a broth of tororo-jiru. Basho might have stopped at the Chojiya, which opened in 1596 and still proudly serves this delicacy today. Mountain yams are among the few tubers that can be eaten raw, but grating them with a large mortar and pestle is hard work, as Hokusai makes clear in his take on Mariko Station that you see on the lower right here. Tororo is less appreciated for its flavor, which is in fact rather bland, than for its mouthfeel. When grated, it has a cool, sticky consistency that lends itself to thickening or being used as a garnish for summer dishes. Hokusai's view of Mariko in his Tokaido Road series alludes to Basho's famous poem by depicting a blossoming plum next to the humble thatched hut where two travelers, drawn by the sign outside reading meibutsu tororo-jiru, have taken a break from their journey. As in other lyrical designs in this series, Hiroshige has evoked not only the season, but also the time of day. It is sunset, as suggested by the pinkish glow in the sky. There are many other delicacies available on the Great Eastern Coastal Highway, but it's time to sample the offerings in Edo's famous restaurants. Kyoto's inland location limited the consumption of fresh seafood, but Edoites could enjoy a dizzying variety. This view of the bustling fish market near Nihonbashi Bridge in Edo, which is in the exhibition, gives some idea of the range of fish that were available. Moving from right to left, there are fishmongers displaying crab, mackerel, abalone, and colorful sea bream. A man carrying a live octopus that threatens to escape from his hook. And on the far left, two men carrying a giant tuna. Sushi has a long history, but not in the form that we know it today. Its earliest manifestation, nare-sushi, was a smelly concoction of fermented rice and fish. The heavily salted rice was intended to preserve the fish, and it was discarded before eating the fish. Oshizushi, a second variety that developed later in Osaka and spread to Kyoto, involved using vinegar rather than fermentation, and pressing the sushi rice and topping it into a wooden mold, then cutting it into slices, as you see on the right in the middle slide. Nigiri-zushi, the hand-formed, two-finger-sized bites of vinegared rice topped with fish and other tidbits, first appeared in Edo in the 19th century. Initially, nigiri-zushi was sold as a snack by street vendors. But as this delightful print of a woman offering one covered with shrimp to an eager child shows, it was quite ubiquitous. What this print also shows, and this is one way in which print can tell us a great deal about that period. This print also shows that the nigiri sushi that was served at that time was considerably larger than its modern day counterpart. By the 1840s and 50s, sushi had become part of the multi-course fare offered by the city's leading restaurants. And the image that you see here on the left, through wordplay in the inscription, in fact promotes one of these restaurants, the Matsuno Sushi. Matsuno Sushi, the most famous Edo restaurant specialized in sushi, was celebrated a series of 50 prints titled Collection of Famous Restaurants in the Eastern Capital, 4 of which are in the exhibition. I urge you to look out for them when you visit it. These prints were a collaboration between Kunisada and Hiroshige, the two top-selling woodblock print artists of their day. For Matsuno Sushi, which you see on the left here, Hiroshige designed the landscape in the fan-shaped cartouche and the tray with blue and white porcelain dishes with the inscription Matsuno Sushi. Kuniyoshi, who is better known for his figural compositions, portrayed the kabuki actor Iwai Kumesaburo III in the role of Osato, the daughter of a sushi shop owner. Osato is a character in the historical drama Yoshitsune of the 3,000 Cherries, one of the most popular plays in the kabuki repertory. This work, promoting both the restaurant and a leading actor of the day, exemplifies the clever cross-marketing characteristic of many 19th century prints. Calligraphy and painting gatherings, shogakai, were a fad in Edo that began in the 1830s and continued after the fall of the Tokugawa shogunate in 1868. These events, presided over by professional painters and calligraphers like the bespectacled one seen on the right here, gave aspiring artists an opportunity to demonstrate their skills and to mingle with celebrities merely by paying a modest admission fee. Gatherings were often held at large restaurants that could accommodate the crowds that wanted to join in these often boisterous events. This print by Kuniyoshi depicts a variation of the shogakai, a party at the Matsuno Zushi restaurant where the kabuki actor Ichikawa Danjuro, 7, and his extended family, also actors, are busy autographing folding fans, inscribing poems on long slips of stiffened paper, and even painting a scroll with a figure of Tsukeroku, a kabuki role made famous by actors of this lineage. They carry out their work, which would be distributed later to loyal fans, to the accompaniment of an enticing platter of sushi and of sake. Notorious for his extravagance, Danjuro 7 was exiled from Edo between 1842 and 49, but this print from 1852 suggests that his lifestyle changed very little after his return. Yaozen was another famous restaurant in the second quarter of the 19th century, but unlike many others in the Asakusa district, it survived into the 20th century, closing only after the 1923 Kanto earthquake. It was among the 30 restaurants that Hiroshige celebrated in his series Collection of Famous Edo Restaurants. He depicted its spacious banquet room with a rack of 4 long swords of the type carried by men of the warrior class, a sign of the superior status of Yaozen's clients. In keeping with his predilection for landscapes, Hiroshige has also drawn attention to the view of Mount Fuji that could be had from the restaurant. Yaozen was frequented by celebrities, including the literati artist Tani Bunsho, whose signature figures on the painting of grasses hanging above the transom in Hiroshige's view on the left. The illustration from the right is from a book that was published by the restaurant, and it further testifies that habitués included many literati painters, poets, and calligraphers. Yaozen began as a grocery store whose entrepreneurial proprietor, Kuriyama Zenshiro, supplied vegetarian food to monks in the neighborhood. But under the 4th generation Zenshiro, the restaurant of the same name, located in Sanya in Asakusa, became one of the most popular gathering spots for Edo's literati. Many of these men contributed poems and illustrations for the Handbook of Fashionable Cuisine for Edo Epicures, which is published serially between 1822 and 34 under Zenshiro's auspices. This publication includes views of the 2-story establishment and of the banqueting facilities inside. These show that Yaozen offered private rooms where Chinese-style cuisine, known as shippoku or fucharyori, was served on tables, as well as a veranda where those dining on individual trays in the Japanese style could enjoy the view. The table setting on the left, which includes European-style wine glasses, speaks to the hybrid character of fucharyori, which developed in Nagasaki, a southern port city, where there was a large Chinese population, as well as a small number of Dutch merchants. Conscious of Yaozen's important place in Tokyo's culinary history, descendants of Kuriyama Zenshiro maintain a website with information about their family's restaurant. It includes recreations of dishes based on recipes included in the Handbook for Fashionable Cuisine for Edo Epicures. Here are 2 of them. One for Yaozen's special chazuke, a rice with warm green tea poured over it, served with a side dish of pickled vegetables. And the other, a tasty combination of 3 varieties of fresh noodles made with shrimp, fish, and spinach. These are the kind of dishes that please the palate of Edo's epicures. The menus in the Handbook for Fashionable Cuisine for Edo epicures are organized according to the 4 seasons, underscoring the importance of seasonality in Japanese cuisine. Meibutsu food culture was inextricably bound up with place, soil, climate, and seasonality. The flavor of buckwheat grown in one region may differ from the same crop grown in another. Likewise, fish taste differently at different times of the year. In the 19th century, even as Japan was becoming increasingly urbanized, most people still knew and cared about when and where various fruit, vegetables, and fish were best harvested. We're all familiar today with the mantra, fresh, seasonal, and local vegetables. But this contemporary gastronomic ideals has deep roots in Japan, as its woodblock print tradition demonstrates. Thank you. Over to you, Clem. Over to you, Clem.
Thank you, Christine. Maybe I'll just you can stop sharing, and then I'll sort of.
Okay, I'll stop share. There we go.
And then let me try to do this. All right. Well, thank you again for the very informative and insightful lecture. I think you have hit a few things for us. Firstly, I think for friends and audiences in Singapore, I think you have stirred our stomach right now because we're getting into supper time or dinner here. And I guess in a period like this that we, I mean, for all of us who love Japan and we love to go back to Japan, unfortunately, we can't do so. And I think, I really thank you for the lecture, for taking us, time traveling back to look at some of these wonderful culinary cuisines, and we were slavered to that. And hopefully, when things get better, we can all go back to Japan to enjoy some of these food again. I just want to say that today's lecture is part of our ACM's program that is supported by this foundation. This session is also held in conjunction with our ACM current special exhibition, which Christine has dropped a few mentions during her lecture earlier on, and it's titled Life in Edo, Russell Wong in Kyoto. The exhibition, to those who have not seen it, and for those who can't come into Singapore at this point, there will be an online digital dollhouse version that we will be releasing. So we hope that you can, at least catch it online. But this exhibition, sort of the focus of it, explore Japanese culture, art, and tradition across time and space through 2 mediums, Edo woodblock prints, Edo period woodblock prints, and contemporary photography of Kyoto taken by Singaporean master photographer Russell Wong. So today's lecture, we have time traveled back to Edo period, thanks to Christine, and I've learned so much about culinary and gastronomic cultures through these wonderful Japanese prints. It's a peculiar one because instead of focusing the show on sort of the artist's point, sort of their artistic styles or the networks of their lives and who are the artists that sort of collaborated with them at the ACM, we decided to put the genre and themes of woodblock prints, the subject matter, on the forefront. So things like travel, themes like beauty, vanity, pet, relations with animals, gastronomy, which is today's topic, and food culture, gardening, seasonal festivals, subject matters that really resonate with our Singaporean audience or the wider community today. And I guess, you know, today we talk so much about meibutsu and meisho are the key to, in terms of promoting of tourism in Singapore, and are frequently depicted in these medium, whether they are manuscript books or paintings since the Edo period. And basically it draws us back to all this NHK World and all this Japanese TV variety programs about traveling domestically in Japan, looking at all these regional specialities. It's not a recent phenomenon, it seems, and it definitely has this influence and roots traced back to Edo period. So in your talk, Christine, you focus on meibutsu and meisho, and a lot of these cultural trends and interests happen because of the ability and accessibility to travel, at least domestically speaking, in Edo period. Could you share with us how easy or difficult was it for people, common people, townspeople to travel during the Edo period?
Can you hear me? I'm not sure if you okay? Good. Well, theoretically, it was quite difficult to travel because people had to have travel passes and they had to show these at stops along the various roads. But in fact, many people did manage to travel under the pretext of pilgrimage to various shrines. So domestic travel was really booming. Usually people traveled in groups, and there were in fact, there were groups, often groups of women who went together on pilgrimage to various shrines. And there are in fact lots of diaries of both men and women who went on the Tokaido Road and from there to Ise. So travel was a major industry then as it is now.
Wonderful, as we can see from this print depicted by 𝐷𝐸 showing one of the post station at Mia, and there's this group of ladies over here who are traveling. I mean, basically, you can see that they hired or engaged a peddler on the very right side of the print, sort of carrying perhaps the ladies' belongings as a form of porter service over here. Maybe just quickly to the next questions before we open it up to some of the Q&As from the public participants. You show these two prints which are featured or on show in our exhibition. So my question here, it always perplexed me, is on soba. You know, you can see from the kanban, the signboard, on the left you have in kanji 2-6 nidoku. And then on the right, where you mentioned about Bodhidharma, and unfortunately on the top left of the shot, there is a billboard, but it's covered with this cloud cartoon. Yeah. But you can make sort of, you can get it, you know, you can see the sort of the shape of the Chinese kanji character is Nihachi, is 2-8. So 2-6, 2-8. Some scholars refer to the blending ratio of wheat and buckwheat to make soba noodles. Others refer to as a price for a bowl of soba noodles. So 2-6 will be 12 mon and 2-8 will be 16 mon. So which is right?
I'm not an expert on this. I mean, I've seen both, but since my focus was on food, I opted for the 2-6. And in fact, to be honest, in preparing this lecture, I looked at you can find anything on the internet, and I found some really interesting little videos on YouTube of people making soba. And you can see that it is a difficult thing to make, and it does require some flour to bind together the dough. So I opted for the food explanation as opposed to the cost. But I think you would have to consult with somebody who's more knowledgeable than I to answer for sure.
Definitely. And would you say that, you know, in terms of, because you talk about this meibutsu, again, going back to the topic of meibutsu and meisho, and very much the idea is not to just enjoy some of these products or some of these cuisines, but it's also the idea of gift giving. Today, with what we refer to as omiyage, temiyage, or in the form of gift givings like okaiji, as a returning fact, the gesture of a gift is a deep part of Japanese culture, and I guess for East Asian culture as well in China and Korea. Would you agree that this sort of art of gift giving culture started in Edo period, or it goes way back?
Oh, it goes way back. But what's very interesting, I'm in fact I'm doing some research on meibutsu and its various meanings and how meibutsu changed. But there's no question that meibutsu labeling was part of the culture of gifting, because what the label meibutsu did was give a kind of culturally sanctioned label to a product saying this is special, and everybody knew its value. It's like going to a store today and being sure that you come home with not only the product, but the bag that tells you where you bought it. The bag saying, I don't know if you're in France, Hermès or Vuitton. It's a kind of brand label that assures quality. And with the commercialization of culture during the Edo period, this brand label became increasingly important and increasingly valorized through gift giving.
Well, let's open the sort of the floor to some of the questions that have come in.
Oh, there are lots of them, I see.
Yeah, looking at 11 of them. Richard Singer, did these famous restaurants and shops pay the publishers for the privilege of being included in the prints? Surely they would function as great advertising. I'm sure you sort of teased a little bit of your answer in the previous reply already, but would you like to say something?
Yeah, no, thank you very much. It's a great question. I think scholars have learned through, and most scholars are aware, and increasingly so, that many woodblock prints were subsidized by various commercial enterprises. And, in a sense, prints constituted a kind of early modern infomercial. The makers of makeup, restaurants, producers of food, and especially the designers and producers of textiles use prints very, very widely in order to promote their goods.
There was a question by Faisal Husni, one of our curators at the museum. Say, thank you so much for the lovely journey, Dr. Christine Guth. May I ask if there were examples of food offerings for rituals or religious purposes or at shrines depicted in similar Japanese woodblock prints? Thank you.
There are certainly representations of shrine offerings of food in Japanese visual culture, and there probably are in prints, but they don't come to mind offhand, but certainly there are many representations of them.
Hang on, there's another question that comes in. My chat box keep moving, so it's a bit hard to track. Professor Nozomi Naoi, thank you so much for the wonderful lecture. The role of prints as advertising food and restaurants was very interesting, especially with the final example of the handbook that the restaurant published themselves. Was this common? How much did restaurants sponsor all these prints that were depicted? I think, again, this relates back to Rich Linger's questions. And were the printmakers commissioned? It would be wonderful to know the larger context between the restaurants and the printmaker. Maybe just the last part, in terms of the collaboration. Restaurants and print.
There was definitely collaboration between restaurants and printmakers, and I'm trying to think what I could say beyond what I have already said. I mean, the book that I showed, the cookbook that I showed is unique as far as I know, but certainly there are many instances where restaurants figure in prints. I mean, I showed 2 series, but there are others that have been studied by scholars, among others by Hans Thompson. There's a very interesting articles article about the many restaurants that were represented in prints. And those seem to have been a collaborative effort between the restaurant owners and printmakers.
And I believe there is also a lot of sort of word of mouth advertisement, given that, you know, many of these restaurants and some of the ryote, multi-story floor restaurants are also sort of venues for scholars and musicians and poets to come to gather as well. And being a publisher, I guess this is also the very hip kind of place that you can come to that one spot, but you can get many sort of insights out of it, what's happening and what are the most sort of creative people gathering at which restaurants. To that, just to add on to Christine's point. There is another very interesting question over here by Reiko Tomi. Wonderful talk to remind us that we have to read art, whether it's ukiyo-e or 1960s conceptual art. Now my question is, how was the literacy rate of Edo, Japan for an ordinary person to appreciate these travel information? For maybe for an average people, there is difficulty on reading Kuzushiji, and how Edo people can read them is sort of part of, I guess it's also something that I've wondered as well.
Yeah. Oh, Reiko, thank you for that wonderful question. And if you're on the East Coast, I am very grateful that you got up at this early hour. That's a good question, Reiko. And as the literacy rate in Japan was extremely high. And I think that there's considerable evidence that decoding prints was a kind of game. People really enjoyed trying to see the many different kinds of messages that were encoded within them. And I mean, the print by, the first one that I showed, the Bonito by Hiroshige, is just one of many examples. As for Kuzushiji, I have to confess, I can't read Kuzushiji, and I'm dependent on Katsuji printouts of these texts. But I imagine that in the Edo period, people, I mean, literate people were more able to read this material. So, but that's a really good question. You know, whether everybody could or just some, I don't know.
I mean, Christine, you mentioned about, you know, reading into these prints and then picking up, you know, sort of the symbolisms or the meanings that is associated to it. I mean, in the sort of Edo people's mindset and that question, although this is not sort of textual based, but it reminds me a little bit of these two prints by Hiroshige, sort of characters from places, merchants and customers, depicting two different sort of corner market scenes. And if you look at each sort of sections of it, they are all sort of representing different scenes or kabuki plays or from the puppet theater plays. And it requires someone that sort of understand kabuki or puppet theater and understand what the play is about and sort of gets that punt or humor into it. I think the two dishes that you highlighted to us, unagi no kabayaki, if you look at the picture on the left, it shows that unagi no kabayaki, but in fact, it is also sort of going back to a very famous kabuki play called Keisei Hangoro, Hangoko, which talks about the story, the very famous story of Matahe and his wife Otoku paying a visit to his teacher of the Tosa Mitsunobu school, an ex-court painter. And they brought eel from Seta as the gift to the teacher. And of course, that stone column that you see, Seta Mae Kabayaki, plays a crucial role in the kabuki play as well. And there is also that sort of, you know, sort of linking to the Ishikawa Goemon story on the right and the other image as well. Just gonna pick a few more questions from the participants. The one that I'm looking at right now is, I have to stop sharing so that I can see the questions properly. From Sujata. Sujata Well, Dr. Sujata say, thank you for this fascinating talk, Dr. Guth. These beautiful prints promote the famous places and products, food along the Tokaido. Could the prints only be bought in Edo or elsewhere too? And could they only be bought in individual publisher shops, or were there different prints from different publishers sold at the same shop? Thank you.
Oh, that's a wonderful question. So prints could be bought in many places. There were shops in Edo. Often they were the print makers themselves, and they were strategically located by the Nihonbashi. Many of them were strategically located by the Nihonbashi Bridge, so that people entering or leaving the capital could buy prints there. I think I lost the rest of your question.
Could they only be bought in individual publisher shops, or were there different prints from different publishers sold at the same shop?
That's a good question. I think that most of the shops that one sees represented seem to suggest that a single publisher would have, in Edo anyway, would have his own prints. But we know that there were itinerant print sellers, and we also know that in other cities, there would be booksellers who would have materials from different publishers.
Well, there's another question from W. Not sure what is your name, but are the famous restaurants featured in the print still in existence today? If they are, give us some examples. I believe Christine has, she has shown many examples. One of the examples is on the Mariko station, which is still around. The shop is called Chojiya, and it's sort of at the westernmost part of Shizuoka prefecture, I believe. If you type Chojiya Mariko Tororojiru, you'll probably get the hits on Google very easily. So there's another from Anjali Paul. My question has to do with the print to the. My question has to do with the print to the left. The painting depicts Buddha, correct? Is the timing of this print connected anything in regards to the spread of Buddhism in Edo, Japan? I believe, Anjali, you're referring to the Bodhidharma print. And well, of course, Buddhism is one of the key big religion in Edo period, but of course, the spread of Buddhism into Japan comes way back earlier. I mean, as to Nara period, during the Heian period, there is all this exchange with sort of Korea and Japan, China already in terms of the spread of Buddhism. So I think, Buddhist figures are also sometimes interesting depictions for ukiyo-e prints. Do you agree, Christine?
Yeah, you see many prints featuring Buddhist subject matter, but as you said, Buddhism was already very well established in Japan. What distinguishes many woodblock prints in their representation of Buddhist deities or Buddhist practices is there is a level of irreverence that that you don't find so often. I mean, it's seen, but it's not quite so common in earlier painting.
Just looking at some of the other comments, questions. Were these prints hung at home? Thank you. Well, I mean, they were used for various purposes. I mean, some you hung it or you pasted it at home, but they're also very much replaceable. I think this person has two questions. Were these prints considered as art paintings to be displayed? Some of these prints seems like advertising leaflets. From what I understand, they definitely were.
I mean, they were all of those things, and certainly people sometimes pasted them on the walls of their houses. You can find that in woodblock prints, but there were people who collected them and pasted them into albums, and there are quite a few surviving albums that are really interesting because they show the taste of one individual. So we know, for example, that there were collectors who were particularly interested in a particular kabuki actor and would buy all the prints of that particular kabuki actor. And I've been told that in Japan, among collectors today, there are often people who want to buy prints featuring the locale where they live. And sometimes the quality of the print is less important than the fact that it represents a particular place. And these today, of course, are framed, but that would not have been the case.
Thank you, Christine. I think we have hit slightly past 8, and I would hate to hold everyone up for supper, dinner, or going to work if you're in the States. So once again, thank you, ladies and gentlemen, everyone, for your participation. And again, thank you, Christine, once again, for getting up this early and for sharing with us, your views